The Nintendo GameCube was sort of an underrated console when it came out back in 2001. The PlayStation 2 had already come out, and here was Nintendo. They were sort of late to the party, and they were trying their best to prove to the video game industry and consumers alike that they still had it, that they could make an incredible, groundbreaking console.
Whoa, in your hands.
I really love this console, guys. You know, I wouldn't call it my favorite Nintendo console, but I have so many incredible memories playing Nintendo GameCube games back in the day, and I want to share some of those with you and give you my top 10 favorite GameCube games here in today's video.
Final battle, fight!
No, yeah.
Hey guys, just a quick announcement. After the video is over, be sure to check out the all-new My Retro Life shop. Just head on over to myretrolife.shop. Through the month of March, I'm selling a limited edition My Retro Cube t-shirt. Also, everything is 10% off store-wide when you use the promo code RETROLIFE. Now, on to the video. Coming in at number 10, it's Super Monkey Ball. Now guys, this is a pretty landmark title for me. I remember my dad and I getting this when the GameCube came into our home after we had imported the console from Japan just weeks after 9/11. It's a crazy story, and I've done an entire video on that. But one of the first games we played, and it came bundled in this package that we got, was Super Monkey Ball. And what was even more amazing to us was that this was the very first Sega video game that we ever played on a Nintendo console, at least officially licensed.
Presented by Sega on a Nintendo machine. That is so weird.
I remember just the concept alone, controlling a monkey inside of a glass ball that's rolling around, and it just has all the hallmarks of a Sega game. It just has that blue sky, that Sega charm. This was originally in the arcades for Sega, and we never played the arcade game. And I gotta say, Super Monkey Ball kind of left the best impression on me and my buddy and my dad when we all played the GameCube for the first time. I think honestly it's the tight controls. The GameCube controller feels like it was made for this game, and it's just such a great game. It's so much fun to play with other people or even by yourself, just trying to master it and get through each of the stages. It's a challenge, but man, it's a fun challenge, and it's a must-have for the GameCube. Animal Crossing was a revolutionary title in that this was the first video game I think I ever played where I felt such a calm, guys. I felt so peaceful when I just explored this village and talked to my animal neighbors, had them help me build my house, chop down trees, catch bugs in a net. The core of what made Animal Crossing so appealing is still present here on the GameCube. And man, it was just so much fun to keep coming back to this game. I mean, for the better part of a year, that's what I did. I often, even if I wasn't going to be playing it for a long time, I would check in on Animal Crossing. And at the time, my dad had remarried and I had a stepbrother and a stepsister. I would be playing in my town. They would have their own village and you could interact with each other. You could interact with each other on the GameCube console. And that was what was so revolutionary. One thing I do love so much about Animal Crossing on the GameCube is the kind of virtual console that was built into the game. You could find Nintendo games like NES 8-bit games and put them in your house and play them. That was amazing. There was just something so ingenious about Animal Crossing. And to this day, I mean, that's why it's one of the greatest franchises Nintendo ever released. What can I say about Super Smash Bros. Melee? I mean, this was such a leap over Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64. And Melee just took that concept. It was almost like the N64 original was kind of a proof of concept. And then Nintendo was like, all right, we're pouring everything into this and we're going to make this just one of the greatest games we've ever made. And that's what Super Smash Bros. Continues to be. Just one giant love letter to Nintendo fans with all of their famous characters and even some, characters that fall under the radar that people may have forgotten about. The first game was pretty revolutionary and awesome, but there was always that feeling of like, is this a one-off? Is Nintendo not going to make any more of these? But with Melee, oh my gosh, it was like, okay, where have you been all my life? Like, the roster is just greatly improved over the original game. I would have so much fun with my friends playing this game over the different generations from N64 and up until today with the Switch. The GameCube entry is the first one I ever remember entering myself into a tournament for. It was really, really cool, guys. It was cool being in that tournament. I didn't make it very far. The character I always played as back then was Fox. I just loved how fast Fox was, but also I just really loved his moveset. The story mode in the game is just unbelievable. It took what they started in the single-player campaign of the first game and just multiplied it by 100. I mean, it really made you want to play through the game as every character. That's how robust the story mode was in this version, and I just love all the unlockable characters. Man, this is where Smash Brothers really found its feet, and for that, it's got to be here on this list. It's one of my favorite GameCube games. Eternal Darkness. Where do I begin with this game? Oh my gosh. Guys, like this title, it's not at the top of my list here, but it's one of the most memorable video game experiences I ever had as a gamer. This game was published by Nintendo, and that in itself was crazy back then because here you had a mature-rated survival horror game that wasn't too different from like Resident Evil or Silent Hill. You play as this young woman who has gone to her grandfather's mansion to basically pick up the pieces after he passes away. And when she goes there, she learns through reading the different books and things that he left behind. She starts discovering that her own family history is caught up in this very supernatural, wild mystery. And I love this game for so many reasons. All of the insanity effects, like that's where this game is at. And the more scared you get, the more damage you take and your health goes down, the more insane you start to get. And there's moments where you'll enter a room, right? And your head will fall off your body and you'll walk around in circles. And then suddenly the game will like laugh at you, like the ghostly spirits of the game will laugh at you and send you back to the beginning of that room. Like this was a weird cerebral thing that because they did this and because they were so creative to do something like this and the other insanity effects, I'll always remember this game. One of the ones that really tripped me up, it showed me a memory card screen, and instead of saving the game goes down to delete. It says it wants to delete your save. I nearly had a heart attack when I was 15 years old watching this happen. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Oh man, guys, this is such a good game. Seriously, if you haven't ever played it, you got to check it out. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. What a divisive title in the Legend of Zelda series. I don't know, there was kind of like an attitude and a swagger that Nintendo had around this time where like they didn't care what everyone else was doing. They were just going to be them and do what they were doing. I feel like it's one of their most artistic systems, and The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker exemplifies that more than anything. I mean, it's such a great entry into the Zelda franchise, and I don't know, say what you will, if you don't like the Toon Link and cel-shaded designs of this game, I get it. It may not be for you. It may be too cutesy, but it's such a fantastic Legend of Zelda game. You know, in Ocarina of Time, that felt huge when you first played it, right? When you first played it on Nintendo 64, the open world of Hyrule Kingdom, you know, jumping on Epona and riding as far as you can across that field. It just was such a great feeling. And I think for Wind Waker, Nintendo just said, you know what? You thought that was cool. We're going to let you set sail across the open sea on a canoe, on a little sailboat, and you're going to explore the ocean. You're going to explore the world that way. and it just looks beautiful. Even to this day, the game stands out because of its unique designs. It has aged so well, like a fine wine. From what I remember of how far I got into it back in the day when I was a teenager, oh my gosh, I had such a good time with it. I never got around to finishing it. It did get pretty difficult in some areas, and it's one that I need to go back to. But from what I did play of it though, it was one of the greatest experiences I had on the GameCube. Luigi's Mansion. Talk about Nintendo taking risks. I mean, launching the GameCube not with a traditional Mario game, but a Luigi game. That was a first. And I gotta say, guys, we were all very skeptical about what Nintendo was doing. It was a risk-taking game, and I'm sure glad Nintendo took the risk because it's such a rich experience. I love it because I'm a huge Ghostbusters fan. And so to combine basically Ghostbusters with the Super Mario franchise, a stroke of genius. And this game, I feel like, defined Luigi as a character in a way that we'd never seen him before, really, in other games. This was such a great game. I just remember marveling at the amazing translucent kind of effects on the ghosts as you try to bust them with this vacuum cleaner, the Poltergust 3000, the Professor Egad. I mean, like, there's just so much fun in this game. The characters, they stand out so much, and I just love the character designs of the ghosts. And really, when you have these boss battles, they're so creative and unique and really scary too. I'll never forget just being like really scared with the baby boss. Like, oh my gosh, the baby ghost boss was like freaky to me. And I beat the game early on when we got the game at launch, and it became one of the greatest Super Mario franchise experiences I ever had. And it wasn't even a Mario game. It was a Luigi game.
I think that Luigi's Mansion was very satisfying and incredibly good. And great story, great progression.
Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2. Now, this game is on this list, and it's so high on the list because I was such a huge fan of Phantasy Star Online. It was probably one of the games back in my teenage years that I sunk the most time into on my Sega Dreamcast. I've done an entire video about my love and my memories of that game, but this version of the game, which included an entire new episode, felt like the sequel that we had been craving and hoping for. Diving into the new stages and basically the new episode of Phantasy Star Online was such a thrill for me, guys. And I just loved creating a new character, jumping into this world again after I played it so much on the Sega Dreamcast, and experiencing all that the new episode had to offer. And wouldn't you know it, to boot, you had episode 1 also. So it was really the complete Phantasy Star Online package back in those days, guys. I mean, I didn't spend as much time with the GameCube version as I did the Dreamcast version, but just getting to play with all the new weapons and experience the new mags. You know, those are like the familiars, the characters that ride on your shoulder. And it was such an interesting time because Sega was gone. You know, it was sad for a lot of us Sega gamers. You know, a game like Phantasy Star Online just really made us feel a little more at home after losing our favorite console, the Dreamcast, of that generation at the time. I love this game so much, and even to this day, I've rediscovered it a bit by playing it on the Dolphin emulator for the GameCube and actually going onto the private servers that exist. There are private servers that people host for this game, and you can still play it online with others today. It's so much fun getting to play online with people still, and I just get such a blast out of Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2. It's one of my favorite GameCube games. Super Mario Sunshine. I mean, it's the flagship Mario game on the GameCube. You know, Mario always was the title on the Nintendo console that basically made the statement. It was supposed to be one of the greatest games that would come out on that console. And so the hype for Sunshine was, I mean, through the roof. Nintendo, again, was taking chances and playing by their own rules. And they had devised this new kind of gimmick for Mario, which was basically water backpack robot character. I remember thinking, man, you know what? I don't know about this. Now Mario's got a glorified super soaker. I mean, it was weird, but it worked. It worked so well. And the game, because of the water effects and just some of the cool things they were able to do with this Mario game in a summertime setting, to me, it's one of the perfect games, if not the best game, to bust out around summertime and play and just have so much fun with. Running around with your water pack and just cleaning up the island and all of the grimy, kind of like, sludgy monsters and characters. There's just such a unique and awesome visual style here. And it's just so much fun. The GameCube controller had this kind of pressure sensitive thing going on. And so it was just perfectly made for the controller. You pressed in on the trigger and you felt like you were controlling the amount of water you wanted to come out of the water gun. And then you could switch it, you could turn it into a jetpack. And that was just genius. You can fly around with the water blasting out of your jetpack. The fact that this game all takes place on an island, Delfino Island, there's just so much uniqueness and charm to this one. And I really love it for that reason. Nintendo makes sure that they don't remake the same game twice, especially when it comes to Super Mario. I mean, every 3D Mario platformer feels like its own thing. And Super Mario Sunshine is not alone in that. Resident Evil 4. I was so torn on where this belonged on the list, either 1 or 2. Capcom decided to completely overhaul the Resident Evil gameplay with this game. Again, GameCube taking existing franchises and totally turning them on their heads. That's why I love this console. And a lot of people forget that Resident Evil 4 started on the GameCube. Now, there was something about the new freedom that you had in this more third-person shooter version of Resident Evil. And the fact that you weren't even fighting zombies anymore, you were fighting diseased villagers who were just crazy. They'd gone insane. It upped the ante. Story-wise, things were going in different places for Resident Evil, and it was great taking control of Leon Kennedy again. I mean, he was one of the greatest characters in the franchise. We got to finally figure out what was going on with him after his partner Claire got her own game. And visually, it did things on the GameCube that we'd never seen before, or just in games in particular. It just looked beautiful, guys. Going along this sort of Spanish castle and trying to rescue the president's daughter, who's been kidnapped by this crazy cult. Oh my gosh, guys, it was so cool. The lighting effects, the scares, the tone, just the feeling of dread in this game was unsurpassed. And the gameplay is where it's at. I mean, aiming and shooting and the amount of precision that you felt with that GameCube controller. So many of the greatest jump scares and moments were found in this Resident Evil game. And for that, it was one of the greatest GameCube games I ever played in my life. But it wasn't the greatest experience I ever had on GameCube. No, that belongs to this next entry. Before we get to my number 1 pick, here is an honorable mention. Soul Calibur II was easily one of my favorite GameCube games near the console's launch. It took everything great about the Dreamcast game that came before it and added to it. Plus, we get Link as a playable character in a one-on-one fighting game. That alone was enough for it to be a system seller. But since the game came out on PS2 and Xbox with exclusive characters on those consoles, this version of the game sometimes gets forgotten. I remember it vividly, though, as Dad got us on tape playing the game.
This is not fair. Oops. No company.
Of course, Metroid Prime is number 1. I mean, this was, another instance in which Nintendo said, we're going to take our franchise, our beloved Metroid franchise in this case, and flip it on its head. They decided to take this beloved franchise that was known as a 2D cavern exploring Metroidvania, which really hadn't been coined yet at that time, that phrase, and make it a 3D first-person shooter with action platforming. I mean, that was crazy, and so many people would have written Nintendo off, and they did, saying that this is not going to work. This is going to be horrible. What are you doing, Nintendo? But they knew exactly what they were doing, guys. They knew that this is what Metroid needed. They needed to inject some life into this franchise. And it feels like you're playing a Metroid game, really. Just that the 2D gameplay so well translates into this 3D first-person shooter. I'll never forget just exploring the planet and really having the game make me feel like I was Samus Aran, like I was in control of her. I was inside her suit. And you see the reflections of like the different kind of effects that would appear on your visor, on the glass visor, whether it's walking through some steam that's rising up out of the planet's core and seeing that steam and the humidity hit the glass, or sometimes you'll do a charge shot, and if you're really close to an enemy when you do that, you will see the charge shot's blast of light reflect Samus's face on the visor. I remember when I first saw that, it was jaw-dropping, guys. And the game runs at a smooth 60 frames per second. It never seems to flinch, it never seems to drop or let up. And the new mechanics of going around and being able to scan everything on the planet basically is scannable. It almost brings this collectathon style of gameplay, which Nintendo is so known for, and brings it into this Metroid world. The boss battles are intense, the gameplay is fast and frantic when you're in those action moments, and the feeling of exploration is just fantastic, guys. It's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece for a reason. It was one of the greatest video game experiences I ever had, and really, when I look back on it, when I think back on what they did, what it was capable of, and what it proved, how it was able to take Metroid and inject new life into it in such a incredible way that a lot of people think this is the greatest Metroid game. It's not my favorite Metroid game, but man, is it ever my favorite GameCube game. Well, that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. And, you know, I really feel like there's just a lot of nostalgia for the GameCube right now. I myself have started collecting it again and getting back into it. I love being able to introduce some of these amazing titles to my daughter. And it's just such a wonderful gaming experience when I look back on the GameCube and what Nintendo was doing with all of these titles, these new entries into their established franchises that really, they did so much risk-taking that really paid off. And really, this is just the tip of the iceberg, guys. I mean, there are so many Nintendo GameCube games that are incredible that I did not talk about here. These may be my favorite GameCube games, but there are so many games that I love. So maybe I'll do another video where I talk about more of my favorite GameCube games. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite games are. And if this is your first time to the channel, do consider subscribing. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.